Some of you may be familiar with the recent documentary that Chris Hemsworth did with National Geographic. One of his episodes focused on cold therapy. I've been doing cold therapy as well as my family for several years now. We found it to be a very, very valuable tool. And since Chris Hemsworth is not available for our video today, we would like to get his next closest stand-in. Surprise! That's right, ladies. You may be feeling things right now that you yourself cannot explain. Now, before we get too far into this episode, I would like to make sure everyone knows that you should consult a doctor or competent medical professional before you do this. And if you don't, you can actually harm yourself. For example, you may freeze your man parts to your leg in the 3 seconds that it takes you to get out of this freezing cold water and back into your house. And trust me, you don't want a skin graft down there.
Alright, I'm getting the hell out of this. God, that is the coolest thing I've ever been in my entire freaking life. Oh, my nuts are freezing to my leg.
All right, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on my history with cold therapy. And this may sound a little bit weird, but this is kind of a hard subject for me to talk about. So I'm going to try and get through this as quickly and painlessly as possible. Hopefully I can hold my crap together here. So I was introduced to cold therapy in a very unusual way. I was in the midst of personal circumstances that were pretty difficult. My son William was on some seizure medications, several seizure medications. They started to react with one another, and he started to have psychotic episodes, like very lengthy psychotic episodes, like 16 hours a day kind of psychotic episodes. So essentially, if he was awake, he was dealing with psychosis. At the same time, his mom had a really bad car accident. The car accident gave her a traumatic brain injury. And the two of them were both dealing with pretty severe neurologic issues at the same time. Now, with psychotic episodes caused from medications, you got to get the medication out of their system. Lucky for me, it was only about 3 months to be able to get it all the way out of his system before he was really calmed down. Now, his mom, on the other hand, anybody who's ever experienced a TBI will tell you that what's really important is peace and quiet, kind of managing your sensory input, what's going on around you, and just being able to rest and let that brain heal. When you have a 7-year-old who is having psychotic episodes every waking moment of the day, it's a little bit hard to come by. So we had this situation where we had one neurologic condition for one person was aggravating the symptoms of the other. And then, so my son would aggravate my wife's symptoms, and my wife's symptoms, would go through the roof, and my son would actually seem to be aware of that and would feel horrible about it. And it would actually make his psychosis worse because he was even more stressed, which added to the psychosis. And it was this really wonderful, horrible spiral into hell. So in the middle of all that, who is the guy that gets called on to try to manage the problem? Is it a doctor? Is it some sort of genius? No. This idiot. So I start trying to read books on neurology. And I start trying to understand, like, chemically what's going on here. Is there some sort of biological thing that I can try to use to help the situation? I am reading books that are way over my head. I have absolutely no business studying any of this stuff. But fortunately, I did pick up a few things. The first thing that really struck me was cortisol. So cortisol nowadays has kind of a bad name almost. It seems like it's trashed on a regular basis. It's an essential hormone. It's part of our natural physiology, and it is extremely useful when it is present correctly and at the right times and in the right situations. So cortisol is a stress hormone. When you start to feel stressed, what it does is the cortisol starts to go into your system. It can help you to, it basically helps your body to get ready to go into fight or flight mode. That's the way it was described to me. So one of the things that's very, very interesting about cortisol is that it tends to make you focus like really well. Now, this goes hand in hand with another biological function that I learned. So your brain is hardwired to notice what is wrong before you notice what is right. So if you have a lion and a blueberry bush, you notice the lion first. The thing that will kill you before the thing that will keep you alive. That's how this works, okay? Your brain's hardwired to do that. You can start to kind of understanding how your brain works can help you, but this is some pretty significant hardwiring. Now, when you are under constant stress for a long period of time, like I was, and like my son was, and his mom was, then you start to, first of all, hyper focus. Okay, you notice flipping everything. And when you do notice everything, you make sure to pick out all the crappiest stuff first, the threats. Okay, so you start to notice everything that's wrong all the time. And that sucks really bad. And cortisol is very useful when you want to get up in the morning. Your body gets a little bit of cortisol and you get out of bed and you mix it with a little dopamine ready to go in the morning. Dopamine will kind of help you to have a little bit of drive, and it gets you going for the day. Yay. Okay. Later in the day, you want to hopefully not have so much cortisol. You want to be able to kind of reduce the amount of dopamine that's in your system and get some serotonin in there and kind of balance so that you can get into a restful state before you go to sleep. If you get nothing but stress, and cortisol screws with your system a little bit. And the cortisol is only supposed to be there to get you ready for the battle. It's a preparation hormone. So it gets flushed out with adrenaline. Now, if you're a caveman and you're walking through the tall grass, ooh, where's the food at? I'm going to find something cool out here. But I also know there's a chance that there's a lion in the tall grass. Okay. Your cortisol is up. You're really focused. You can pay attention to a lot of different stuff in this kind of hyper-focused state. Okay. And when the lion jumps out, you go into fight or flight. Hopefully you live and you run away or you kill it or whatever you're going to do. But the cortisol gets flushed out and you actually have a sense of physical relief when you're done. It's kind of strenuous to have a lot of cortisol in your system. Okay. Nobody likes feeling that stressed all the time. It kind of, lots of cortisol constantly has some negative effects on your cardiovascular system and a whole bunch of other stuff. Okay. If you don't get the flush, your body will make one. Have you ever seen someone who freaked out over something really, really little? I have. I started doing it all the time. I was so flippin' stressed out that if somebody dropped a glass of water on the floor, I would act like the whole freaking world ended. Okay? I was generating fight or flight because of the amount of cortisol was in my system. My body was just like, we're flushing. Okay, next little thing that goes wrong here, we are flushing this boy. Okay, and we're cleaning it out. And I would actually feel some physical relief after having my little meltdown, but I would have the stress cycle start all over again because I just acted like a complete a-hole. Okay, I just yelled at one of my kids, or I said something I shouldn't have said, or God forbid, I kicked a door or damaged drywall or did some stupid thing because I was freaking out. So it was this vicious little cycle. I needed to figure out how to short circuit that cycle for me and for my son and for other members of my family that were under enormous amounts of stress. So my first thought was, if I can engineer like myself going into fight or flight, what would send me into fight or flight? I'm terrified of heights. So I thought, I'm going to jump out of an airplane. First thought, okay? I don't have an airplane. And I'm certainly not going to go skydiving every time I need an adrenaline rush. So next thought was freezing cold water. I jumped in a river that was like a glacier runoff river when I was a kid. It was horrible. Went into fight or flight immediately. Still remember it to this day. So that was my second thought. Freezing cold water. Just jump in, give yourself an adrenaline rush, and get out. So I tried it. And I'll be damned. It worked like a charm. I felt like $1,000,000 freaking bucks when I was done. And I started to do this kind of every couple days. Okay. Now, when you get a bunch of cortisol built up and your body is going like, we're just going to flush this thing, that is a biological function. You can't stop it when it's at that point. Okay. But you can stop it if you know in advance that it's going to happen. It's like trying to stop a freight train. You can't stop a freight train if you have 6 feet notice. But if you know well in advance of where you need to stop, you can start hitting the brakes early. But your control leaves as you get closer and closer to that event. So plan ahead, do controlled explosions periodically throughout your week, throughout your month, or whatever you decide your time frame is. Okay. And that allows you to kind of work through that biological process. It resets your body. I was shocked at how much of the mental and emotional stuff that I was going through could be related to just physical stuff that I felt. In my mind, those are different things. Okay. But just being able to have that adrenaline rush a couple times a week started to make a serious difference for me. It started to make a real difference for my son. I realized my son was super stressed out. Okay. Psychotic breaks for 16 hours a day. Yeah, it ought to stress you out maybe. Okay. So I started to give him ice baths. And it absolutely calmed him down. Like, didn't stop the psychotic breaks, but he was managing things significantly better afterwards. His mom started to do them, and his little brother started to do them. Yeah, I had an 8-year-old sitting in a bathtub filled with ice, loving it, because he felt some relief. Now, after the fact, I realized, I think it was like 9 months later or something, I realized there's actually like scientists who are studying this. I thought I just found like a miracle hack from my biology or something. Apparently, people have been studying this for a while. And there is real scientific evidence that shows that this cold therapy can do unbelievable stuff. So I'm just going to name a couple here just to start out with. First of all, it will supercharge your immune system better than anything I've ever seen in my entire life. I literally don't get sick anymore. Second of all, it helps you lose weight. There is a kind of fat that's inside of your body. They're starting to even call it an organ now. It's called brown fat. And it is filled. It's a type of fat that's different than the other, like adipose fat. It's filled with mitochondria, which actually control your metabolism. So if you want to kick your metabolism up, you have got to find a way to get that brown fat working for you. And these ice baths have been proven to activate your brown fat. The next thing is your dopamine. Now, I have severe ADD, okay, or ADHD. When the doctor first put me through the testing, he was like baffled. He said, you have like unbelievably bad ADD. I don't know how you graduated from high school, much less college. People like you don't function well. And he was wondering what kind of coping mechanisms I had developed or something. I was some sort of experiment that he wanted to figure out. But essentially ADD, they think, is caused from low baseline levels of dopamine. So for whatever reason, your body is producing the dopamine, but it doesn't get into the receptors like it's supposed to. There's some sort of haywire, issue in the process of either creating dopamine, not creating enough, or getting it to where it needs to go. But for one reason or another, that dopamine system is not functioning like it's supposed to, and that's what causes ADD or ADHD. So you can get spikes in your dopamine. So if you go take cocaine, it will spike your dopamine, okay? But then it will bring back down like an equal crash the other direction and bottom you out. And that's why things like that are very dangerous, right? So there are certain things that can kind of spike your dopamine really hard, and then they're going to drop you off a cliff. And we don't want that. What we want is that baseline to come up. Doing an ice bath, cold therapy, raises your dopamine baseline like 600%. And it's pretty well documented. Now, you compare that to the side effects that come along with a lot of ADD, ADHD medicines. There are virtually no side effects to an ice bath other than 2 minutes of suck. Now, for someone that has dealt with this, and I have actually, I can attest to the power of those ice baths to manage ADHD symptoms. It is unbelievable. Now, the other thing is like, how do you do them? There's a lot of sources out there that are way better than me. I'm not going to sit here and try and give, a whole bunch of qualified experience or anything like that. I'm going to put some places to go for good information on this stuff in the description down below the video. But here's what I can tell you. There is a difference between doing cold therapy inside and outside. There's a difference between doing it submerged and in a shower. There is a difference between doing it in stagnant water versus moving water. Okay? If you do it in a shower, you will need it to be colder. The temperature that you have to get that water to have the appropriate fight or flight effect, it's going to have to be significantly colder. And you're going to have to wiggle around in the shower and hope that you don't fall down. Okay. That being said, in the wintertime, I do mine in the shower as much as I can, because I don't like to go out and freeze in the snow. And where I live in southwestern Idaho, the water can get pretty cold, but I also have a shower with like multiple heads all lined up, and I can get sprayed off pretty good kind of in all places. So that works okay. I don't think I would do that if I just had one shower head. I need more water than that. The second thing is doing it outside versus inside. Don't discount the power of that little breeze. Okay. The breeze that there's always a little bit of a breeze usually, but the environment around you, especially in the colder months, that breeze is really valuable. It keeps the intensity of the experience up for the time that you're doing it, and that's really important. Now, stagnant water versus moving water. If you do this in stagnant water, you will build up a layer of heat right around your body. Okay. It's very thin, but it will take the edge off of that cold, and you don't want that. Okay. So if you can find a way to do it in water that moves around, you won't have that chance. So the best way, in my experience, to do this cold therapy is you got to have it outdoors, be able to submerge, and then you got to keep the water moving. And I think I found a pretty cheap way to do it. So what we got here is a jetted tub that I found on Craigslist from a guy who was remodeling his bathroom. And given that I don't like anything to go to waste that doesn't need to, I kept this bad boy out of the landfill and put it in the back of the truck. So the first thing is you've got to build a little bit of a frame around it. Now this thing will sit on cinder blocks when it's in its resting place right here, but we have to make sure that the frame around the outside is flush with the top of the tub unit. So I'm putting some supports underneath the corners. You can see I'm clamping down just some 2x4 just to make sure that I'm keeping the corner right where I want it to be. We're going to screw that down, and we're doing this on all the different corners just to make sure that we're keeping things as level as we can, just so the neighbors won't judge us. Now once that frame has kind of been leveled out there, we're going to take some 2-inch styrofoam insulation boards, and we're going to cut it out, fill in these gaps here, because we don't want the elements exposing the inside of that tub or the mechanics of it too much. So make sure that you use up all the little pieces left over. I certainly don't like wasting anything, so I'm going to walk around back and forth like an idiot until I find a piece that actually will fit in there. Now this is a fun side effect. You get to look like you've been covered in snow from Santa's village, but in the middle of the summer. Now we're going to cut a little hole here with the hole saw, because I was surprised to learn that this thing just plugs in to an outlet. So just stick an extension cord in there. And then we got to start doing our spray foam to fill in the gaps. in all the insulation. There's little cracks everywhere. We're just gonna spray this goop in there, and trust me, you don't want to touch it until you've let it dry. It's really fun to get off your fingers. So with that being said, once it's dried, you just take a little handsaw or whatever kind of tool. You could even use a steak knife, I suppose, but just kind of shave it off. And now we have to go to some trim pieces that we're going to have to put in there. We're going to cover the corners first with some thicker trim pieces, because the siding that we're putting on this is going to have some depth to it. So I cut these down because that is a 45-degree angle there on those two sides. Those angles need to be cut at 22.5 for those of you who were not good math testers in school. I wasn't good at English, if you can't tell. So we also need to put in some backers back behind those corners, because we have pieces that are going to be attached kind of along that face, and they don't have anything to screw into right now. So we're just using the Craig jig, and we're going to pop in a couple of little support pieces that nobody's going to see. It just needs to be some scrap wood, but you'll see here in just a second how it's supposed to go together. Now once we've got those guys installed, we're going to put our little corner trim pieces there. These pieces are going to be aligned vertically, and as opposed to the rest of the siding, which is going to be set in horizontally. Now you can see here we're just using cedar fencing. I'm running it through the joiner just for a minute, just to try and make sure I've got clean edges. And you also may notice that the ugly orange crap all over those cedar boards has been sanded off on the outside in my friend Mike's drum sander that he was nice enough to let me use one afternoon. So I didn't have to spend half of my life sanding those things down, or be anything less than the cheapskate that I am and have to go buy more expensive lumber. So all we're doing is just rotating some cedar fencing with some cut down 1x6 cedar strips, just trying to give that siding a little bit of depth. And once we've got that done, we don't want to put the top board on there yet, because we need to get the top edging in place. So I've cut these boards down the best that I can. This is 1x6 cedar going up on the top rail there, but I just want to do a dry fit to make sure that I cut those correctly. I didn't screw something up somehow. That is entirely possible when I'm doing a project. So I'm just going to be really careful, make sure that everything's going to fit just like I want it. I don't want any edges more exposed than they have to be, especially on some place where your butt is going to go. I don't like cracks in my butt, except for the one that's supposed to be there. That crack I like. It's pretty useful at certain times of the day or week, or how often you go. So once we know that that top is sitting like it's supposed to, we're going to install our top pieces of the siding. You just get the right measurement there and you shave it off. And as you can see, it's nice and flush. We're gonna be looking pretty all the way around. So the next step we have, once those are screwed in, is we are going to go over to those top pieces that are going to go around for our seating part. I'm not even sure what the heck you call that, but we don't want any hard edges. So I'm going to hit this with the router. And I'm just using a 1/2 inch round over bit. And I'm not sure why I decided to go backwards there, but this is cedar, so you want to be pretty careful with it when you're routering it. It's a soft wood. It doesn't like to be routered. You just gotta be careful as you shave it off. Which really shouldn't come as much of a surprise, because how often are you shaving something off that you don't want to be careful with? Now, sanding, on the other hand, you can sand this like the drunk Christmas elf at Santa's village. No problems, go nuts. Just use a nice fine grit sandpaper. I think I'm using 220 here, and buzz it on down. It's almost impossible to screw it up. Now, we're going to line up these corners here. And as you can see, there's a little bit of a chip in that board where the router just didn't play nice with me. But don't worry too much about a little defect like that. We can come back and we'll sand that out later. It's not going to look perfect, but it'll be good enough. So now that we've got some of our pieces around that top edge there clamped down, we're going to screw everything else into it. And I don't know about you, but there's nothing more exciting to me in a project than screwing down the places where people's butts go. So I've been informed by my friend Henry here that I should not at any point in time use the word butt and screw in the same sentence during our build montages. So for that, I apologize. Alright, our next step here is a little bit of plumbing. We've got a drain coming out of the bottom of this thing, and it needs to go at a 90-degree angle away from the base. So we're just going to take a little 90-degree pipe here of PVC pipe. We're going to glue it up so that it has the ability to twist onto that bottom plumbing piece. And then this is our overflow drain. And we put a little bit of the E6000, 7000, 2000, whatever that stuff is there I just showed you. And we're just going to seal that up with a little circular piece of plexiglass, and we're going to crank it down just with a bolt and a nut, and that thing will seal off. We don't need an overflow. It's outside. Nothing's going to happen if this thing overflows other than just water the lawn. So now that we have that 90-degree angle PVC pipe down there hooked to the bottom drain, we have to hook up another just straight piece of black pipe there. That's just black PVC pipe. And I realized that, son of a gun, in order for that thing to lay flat so that it will drain appropriately, I have to cut through the flippin' frame that I just built. Idiot. But we're going to do that. There's a workaround that's not too bad. What's more important is that the water can actually drain out of this thing when it needs to. So we're going to put a little bit more glue on that thing, the black cement, and we need a little bit more space to get over the top of that pipe. So we're just going to put in a couple of leftover cedar pieces as spacers. And then we're going to take another piece of the pressure treated 2x4, and we're going to lay it over the top of those two pieces of cedar, which will reconnect our frame in a reasonably sturdy fashion. And you notice the little overlap there of that cedar piece will keep that pipe right where we want it to go and seal it into place. And apparently I did not use the pressure treated wood for this. This is just a scrap 2x4 because the water is never going to hit it. So who cares? Now the stroke of genius that we're witnessing currently is me putting in a board of that siding right over the top of the flippin' pipe that is needing to drain. I don't know if anyone else is noticing this, but there's no hole for the water to come out of. Let's just watch the rest of this video and see how long this flippin' moron does this before he realizes, oh, son of a biscuit, I actually need a hole for the flippin' water to come out. Is this... Oh no, look, see, I forgot something else as well. That's the first realization that I'm an idiot, was I actually have to put the insulation in there. There is a whole nother realization that I'm going to have to come to here in the next few minutes in order for this thing to not just turn into a big soupy mess underneath of it. But right now, we're just going to put the insulation in. I'm just cutting a little spot out for that frame adjustment that we made in there to fit. Now I've realized it. Oh, too bad we didn't catch that stroke of genius on video. Would have been YouTube magic. But we're just going to take this little piece here, work it with the hole saw, and now we have a place for the water to actually drain. Now you can see that there down on the bottom, all of our siding pieces are in place, and we're just going to do a little bit of touch-up sanding before we start, covering this bad boy with some linseed oil. So just using a regular sponge that you would get from your Home Depot or Lowe's, and soaking up some oil and just slathering this all over this big guy. Just gonna want to try and give it a little bit of protection from the elements and also the enormous amount of water that is going to be splashing around this thing. I was particularly pleased to note the variation in color between our fencing pieces and the strips of 1x6 that we cut down. I think it gives it kind of a nice little accent, touch, oily touch. Does that sound weird? Like an oily accent touch? I don't know. That feels like it sounds weird to me. So anyway, apparently we're just going to have gratuitous shots of me greasing up an outdoor therapy tub. Oh, and also a gratuitous shot of my son's butt. Hey, if that's not awkward, I don't know what is. Alright, so our total cost here was about $328 and change. It definitely helped that I got the tub for free off of Craigslist, but honestly, it wasn't that hard to find. I looked for a couple of weeks, went and picked one up. I was fortunate that it had some jets, which was nice, but they're really all over the place. You can get those things without too much trouble. But now it's time for a test run.
Okay, wait. Please smash the bell for notifications with your belly button this time. And make sure to tell me how to prank my dad. Thank you for watching. And see you next time. I'm just kidding.
I love my fans.
Now, I wanted to make just a few more comments really quick. If you're going to do ice baths, talk to a physician. Make sure you're doing your appropriate homework on it. Don't just start winging stuff, okay? I got lucky that I kind of stumbled upon this, but there's a couple other things that you want to make sure you don't do, and these are mistakes that I made. First of all, you don't have to kill yourself with the temperature, okay? 50 degrees is great, okay? I like to do mine somewhere between 40, 50 degrees, okay? But you don't have to make that water like bitingly, horribly cold in order for this to work, okay? 50 degrees and under for submerged water is great. Don't stay in there forever. You don't have to do it for a half an hour. Couple of minutes is great. Get the heck out. You don't want your body temperature dropping dramatically, okay? And if you're gonna do it with kids, you gotta take the temperature up. You can't do it as cold as you would do it, and you gotta get them out quicker. Their little bodies cannot take exposure to cold for the length of time that an adult can, okay? There's too much surface area versus mass, and there's things like that that you have to take into account. So what I like to do is in the summertime, my kids do it at 50 degrees just like I do because it's a lot easier to warm up when they're done, and they'll do it for like a minute and a half. Now in the wintertime, they're getting like 30 seconds, and I will, if I'm doing it outside, I will actually dump a big bucket full of boiling water in the water that I'm getting into to warm it up enough for them to get in there and still not drop their temperature. It's uncomfortable for them, but they're fine. Okay, quick exposure in, and then they get out. Now the other thing is, don't warm yourself up too quickly. Okay, you gotta let yourself sit there and shiver for a little while. That shivering helps activate that brown fat. It's part of what makes this work. It's gonna make you start to metabolize, generate your own heat a lot better. So let that process work. If you get inside and you need to heat up that fast, you've overdone it, okay? This is supposed to suck, but it's not supposed to be a form of torture, okay? And you don't have to kill yourself to do this, okay? Moderation, be thoughtful about what you're doing. Now, the other part about this, it's really important when you're doing this, okay? Don't do it at night, and don't do it after a workout, okay? This will kick your dopamine baseline up 600%. So if you do it in the morning, it will give you a massive kick of drive to be able to go get the things done that you need to get done that day. It will be fantastically useful. If you do it at 9 o'clock at night, it's going to give you a kick of dopamine that is then going to make it really difficult for you to transition into your sleep. Okay, you want your dopamine kind of backing off towards the afternoon and the evening, and serotonin levels coming up while the dopamine goes down, and that helps you kind of move into sleep. Okay, so don't do this like late in the day. It's a terrible idea, and I know because that's how I started doing it. And all of a sudden, nobody could sleep, and things got a little hairy for a little while until I figured out I'm doing this at the wrong time. Okay, it was a little bit difficult on that side. It was still massively better than what we were experiencing without the ice baths. But it was not the right time. So do it in the morning, do it earlier in the day, and then move on. Now, workouts. Don't do it after a workout, okay? It will constrict your whole system and your blood flow won't work right. You want, after a workout, you want to have like really good blood flow. So cold before your workout will help you actually have more endurance during your workout, maybe actually let you work a little bit harder for longer. And then warmth after the workout will get your body the ability to kind of move the nutrients or whatever it needs to repair stuff better, okay? But if you constrict your system with an ice bath after workout, you might as well have not even done it, okay? Like, I'm not joking. That's not me saying that. That is the research from people who have spent a lot of time like working with athletes and studying this stuff. Okay. So just keep that in mind. All of this stuff matters, but give it a shot. I'm telling you, it is absolutely a life-changing kind of therapy. It is one of the most beneficial things I have ever found, both psychologically, physically, in every way. I have told everyone that I know to start doing this, and I am absolutely shocked at how few people will actually do it. For me, it is like a miracle pill. I take 2 minutes of cold suckiness every morning, and my life has become dramatically better and more manageable, and I'm able to just navigate everything so much better. And it has worked for every single person that I have ever seen do it.